As a kid, I always wanted to strap a motor onto my skateboard, but it's not until recently, with all the renaissance in electrical motors and better batteries, that you actually can. So what do you get when you strap a motor onto the skateboard? You get something like this, the Evolve. When it comes to actually operating the thing, you use this. It's a little Bluetooth wireless controller. You've got 3 little lights along the side here, which indicate whether you're in the low speed, the high speed, or reverse. It's got 3 different settings. You can see there it's flashing slowly, the center yellow light. So we give that a whirl, and that's your low speed. We hit one of the buttons again, it flashes fast, and you're in high speed, which is all very well and good sitting here, but when you're tearing along trying to avoid sticks and rocks and dogs and pedestrians, then it's not exactly ideal. It'd be nice to have something a bit easier to tell what gear you're in. Apart from that, the control is pretty straightforward. You've got a trigger control one way and back the other way is brake. So yeah, riding it, a hell of a lot of fun. A few of us have tested it this week, and we'd have to say we're not skaters. Most of us haven't ridden a board for 15 years, and it showed initially, but surprisingly, once you've spent half an hour playing around on this thing, it's absolutely great fun, and anyone I think who's ever done any snowboarding, surfing or skating would have an absolute ball on this thing. The braking is probably the most difficult thing to get used to initially. This thing has ABS brakes, which, as I said, you apply by pushing the trigger forward, but when you first get on it, even though the brakes are applied quite gently, and it's obviously a balancing act for the designers to get that right, but it wants to throw you off the front of the skateboard, so you really have to brace yourself and lean back before you apply the brakes. Once you've kind of got your head around all that and the controls, it starts to become a hell of a lot of fun. It's very easy to carve from side to side, turns really nicely. Obviously, stopping such a heavy board can be a bit of an issue, but you know, and the brakes, they take quite a while to slow you down to a dead stop, but they will slow you down to the point where you can sort of jump off and run alongside the board pretty quickly. The top speed of the Evolve longboard, or this model, the pintail, is the manufacturers say it's 36 kilometers an hour. Or 22 miles an hour, and yes, it is. It definitely will do that with no problem on the flat. We didn't get it a lot faster. We probably had it up to 38 kilometers an hour, or we did test it at that, but that was on a slight downhill slope. The battery is good for about 2 hours use when you're cruising, according to the manufacturers. As a bit of a test, we did go flat out in the top gear for as long as we could, and we averaged above 30 kilometers an hour. We travelled about 11 kilometres, or 11 kilometres almost exactly, and in a time of about 30 minutes or a bit under, about 27.5 minutes. And that was, as I said, flat stick. The motor does get pretty hot after constant use, and we could have kept going further, but that was the point at which it started to slow down. So I assume there's a bit more life in it after the battery starts to die, which might help you get home. But the other thing, of course, is, you know, it's a skateboard. You just have to put this down and start pushing like the traditional thing, which is quite possible to do. As we said, it's light when you compare it to other motorised skateboard ideas that we've seen, but it's heavy compared to a normal skateboard, so it's going to take a fair bit more pushing than you usually would have to do it, but it's quite doable. It's not great with hills. You can push it up a hill, and it has got torque to go up a fairly gentle hill, but once the gradient starts to get up, you know, in the 10% range or greater, we did have trouble getting it up a hill. Another thing not to do with this is ride it through puddles or water. Not only does it, if any kind of slippery surface, actually it'll lose traction, but yeah, it does not like water. It will break it. So yeah, it's recommended not to ride it in the wet. If you've got to get from one decent piece of tarmac to another, then it'll get across a little bit of rough ground. It costs around $1,000 US. We had a ball on this thing. We also think after a few days of testing it that it's a viable urban commuting option. You can go to work on it, stick it under your desk, recharge it, take it home, take it on the train. It's just simple. All you need is the board. But we're also reminded that we're not teenagers anymore when we were riding it. It's quite scary when you're doing 22 miles an hour on something like this. You wouldn't want to come off it. We also tested in pretty quiet streets, so I think it would be more of a challenge in a crowded environment, not just for you, but for everyone around you and shop windows and everything else. So I think the message here is a hell of a lot of fun, but also take care out there. You certainly don't want to end up with a U-shaped hole in the side of a bus.